Hey everyone, and welcome back to a new video, a very different style of video this time, but I wanted to talk about something that's very personal to me and also I think very personal to many in the community, maybe even yourself. You may have seen by now that rather infamous clip of Henry Cavill trying to explain Warhammer to Graham Norton, and while it's a very fun video to watch, and I think Henry Cavill did a really good job of explaining the hobby on the spot, it's also something that I think we've all experienced, which is just generally a sense of difficulty and, well, quite frankly, embarrassment trying to explain what we do to our friends, family, and people whose opinion we care about. And in this video, I want to talk about that sense of embarrassment and how I felt it, and some suggestions that I've personally worked with to try and broach that conversation about not just what the hobby is, but the world of Warhammer. When I started the hobby back in 2002, when I started secondary school, I fell in love instantly, and it was a passion that ran, well, pretty much until now. Now I'm 30. But when I was growing up in high school, it was a difficult hobby, quite frankly, to be part of, because, well, it put you in a certain clique. And while there was a great community around our Warhammer clubs and in my hometown, walking with the massive Warhammer briefcase through the school corridors to the club and walking through town, it did feel a little bit like a badge of shame. And it is a shame that things did feel that way, but unfortunately that was the kind of way I grew up. It wasn't the cool thing, and unfortunately it kind of put you, well, you know, in a certain group, and kids will be kids. But looking at it today, I don't have that sense of embarrassment being in a Warhammer store and talking to people. I really love it because I guess I've kind of got used to the idea that, well, I don't really care what other people's opinions are. But I've still struggled with talking about Warhammer with my friends and family, particularly my grandparents for some reason, when they ask whether I still do it. And now I'm 30, I feel very self-conscious saying, yeah, I still love collecting models and painting them. And I'll come back to it at the end of this video, but it's a weird thing in our society that we still have things that are for kids and things that are for adults. And once you transition, like past the age of 18, you must never pass that threshold again. I think that's something we've got to get through as a society rather than something we've got to tackle. And the first thing that I'm going to say is that Warhammer has expanded so much further than the core tabletop miniatures game. The core game itself, and Henry Cavill picked up on this, it does feel quite nerdy, painting miniatures and playing with them on the tabletop with dice and that. But the hobby itself has expanded to a massive different set of media, and most notably computer games. We've actually heard very recently about Space Marine 2 coming out, which has got a whole bunch of people excited. And the thing about computer games is they're kind of a step ahead of where the hobby's going. Computer games, you know, used to be quite geeky, quite nerdy, and now they are mainstream, and therefore they are deemed acceptable. But the hobby universe, the Warhammer universe, has kind of seized that and pushed the IPs into that area. And what that gives us as hobbyists is an opportunity to share that universe with other people who may not necessarily go as far as to collect the miniatures and paint the models. And so my first suggestion, if you are finding it difficult to bring up your hobby with friends and family, is actually immerse yourself in some of the computer games out there. A live example for me is that I've got a friend of mine who I've never talked about the hobby with. A couple of weeks ago, I noticed that he was playing Warhammer Total War 2, which is a game I absolutely love. And I actually started a conversation with him one time when we met up socially. And I asked him how often he's playing. I asked him whether he was going to pick up Total War 3, which is coming out soon. And we got into a really good conversation about what we liked about that game. And as we got talking about that universe, I found it actually a little bit easier to drop into conversation that I've been following that universe for quite some time because I play the miniatures game. And in a similar vein, I can imagine that it might be a little bit easier to mention things like that if you and your friends and family are maybe just coming together around those computer games. You can actually do the same thing with the books. Black Library produce so much content, not just physical books, but also audio books. And not only do they make great gifts, but they're also really easy to share. And you might find that actually it's very easy for you to kind of give a friend an old book you've read, an Eisenhorn book, for example, or an Age of Sigmar book that's just come out that you finished reading, the Siege of Terror series, for example, might be a fun one, that you hand the book over and let them borrow it and say, look, check out this book. I wonder if you might like it. And next thing you know, you're talking about the universe, you're talking about the hobby. You say, actually, they've just released the final Primarch model. Let me show you what these models look like. And you suddenly feel a lot less awkward. So I'd really suggest, if you really want to have a conversation about the universe, the games are a great place to start, and there's only ever going to be more games and more opportunity for people to get into the hobby. And really, that's what these games are about. They're bridges into the hobby, so why not go and meet people at that bridge and bringing people in that way? Similarly though, the 40k and Age of Sigmar games are tabletop games, if nothing else. And something I have come to notice with my friends is that while they don't play Warhammer, they do love tabletop games. And one we've played very recently, in fact, is Zombicide Invader. Now, I absolutely love this game, not least because it's a cooperative game and it has miniatures. Now, with Zombicide, you could paint these miniatures, and I'm sure some people do, but at the end of the day, you just get what you get in the box, and that's all you need to play. And we've had some great games, my friends and I, playing this, and it's funny because I've spent years of my life feeling really awkward about playing a game where you paint miniatures and you roll dice to play with them. And I've never felt awkward playing something on a board piece which involves just miniatures. This feels, for some reason, completely easy to open up with my friends, but opening up my 40k army case and talking about the models feels absolutely terrifying. And I still don't know why that is, but I can say that I have found it a little bit easier to talk about what I do in the 40k and Age of Sigmar hobbies while I've been playing this. And it's not just games like this. You have 40k Munchkin. You've got family games like the 40k Monopoly, for example. It must be so much easier to talk about the universe of Warhammer 40k when you're playing a game like Monopoly. And I've always wondered, would it be cool to sub the Monopoly pieces out for actual 40k miniatures and kind of bring that essence into it? But you can see already, I won't labour the point, when you're playing board games with people, you're kind of halfway to the hobby anyways, and you might find that brings you close enough to talk about the hobby that you do play. And finally, I think one of the things we often forget when we play a hobby like Warhammer is that everyone has weird and wonderful hobbies, whether it's knitting, TikTok videos, sports, or whatever. Those aren't weird hobbies. That's the thing. We should probably drop the word weird, but at the end of the day, we all do things we love that other people don't do for one reason or another. But I found when you start to ask people about their hobbies, two things happen. One, I've realised that I don't judge anyone for whatever hobby they do. And so it's probably quite silly for me to think that they're judging me for my hobby. And secondly, you start to realise that people just do these things because they want to enjoy life while we're in this crazy world. And at the end of the day, if you're not hurting anyone, it doesn't really matter what you do. And while we may feel embarrassed talking about our hobby, just as Henry Cavill discovered, it doesn't really take anything away from what we enjoy from it. And at the end of the day, our friends and family, and those we care about most, want us to enjoy things. And so, yeah, I really would suggest as well, ask about what your friends are doing and kind of get into those conversations. You may find they feel quite embarrassed about what they do. And once you kind of bridge those two gaps, you find actually that you just naturally feel a little bit easier talking about what we love. And really that's what it's all about, sharing and caring without sounding a little bit soppy at the end. But yeah, that's generally some tactics that I've found that help me to talk about my hobby and bring people into it. But at the same time, looking to the future, I think, you know, it's going to get so much easier. There's a part of it, there's part of me that wants to say Henry Cavill is a great figure, and it's really great that we've kind of gathered around him to talk about this sort of stuff and to use him as a way to kind of, you know, fly the flag for our community and what we do. But at the same time, we all need to be doing that, and we all need to be kind of stepping into those conversations, because again, we don't need to feel embarrassed. And once one person does it, we all feel a little bit easier, and we can all be champions of the hobby in that sense. But also, I think the hobby is just going from strength to strength. Games Workshop is really, really selling the hobby. They're creating a great community, marketing it really well, putting it on everything and putting it out there in lots of different ways so that people can access that universe and then maybe consider taking the step towards the core hobby later on. And when you have a community like that and you have those opportunities, you realize you've got a really good thing going. So, I'd probably end by saying this is one hobby we should not feel embarrassed about. You should never feel embarrassed for anything you do. But at the same time, I do think that this hobby is actually just incredible for what it is in terms of play, community, creativity, and just, a great fun place to be. But while I'm wrapping up and before I go, I do want to ask if you would mind sharing something maybe you've done to bridge the gap and share your hobby with someone else. There's lots of different ideas. I see, for example, lots of people do share painting with their kids to get them into the hobby, and there's some great stuff on social media of people showing what their kids have done with their first miniature. But there must be loads of other ideas, and I'm just thinking if someone's watching this video and thinking, I want to share my hobby with a partner or a friend who I haven't shared it with before, or mention that I'm in this hobby, maybe they might find an idea in the comment section below. So yeah, please do share that. But as always, I do want to say thank you for watching this video. It's a little bit more tangential, a little bit less edited, and I do hope to do a little bit more of these as I start to get better at recording them. But if you did like it, please do consider liking it and subscribing to the channel if you do want to follow more of my content. But until then, keep having fun, don't feel embarrassed for a moment, and I do hope to see you in the next video. But until then, do take care.